Hey guys, how are you doing? This is Zeb from Zed Outdoors and I hope you're having an awesome day. So today I've come back to see Nick Westermann. Nick, how are you doing?
Yeah, very well. And yourself?
I'm doing very well, thank you. So if you're not familiar with Nick, Nick is a full-time professional toolmaker based here in beautiful rural Wales. Nick has appeared previously on my channel. At the time of recording this, I visited him last year and we filmed a series of videos that is already live on my channel, and those videos have been very well received. Now on this next visit down to see Nick, we're filming another series of videos. Now in this video that you're about to watch, this is actually part 2 of a mini 2-part series on spoon stroke hook knives. Now in the previous video, what Nick talks about in a lot of detail is about spoon knife edge geometry. Now I need to stress that it's ideal that you watch that video before you kind of watch this, but there's no harm whatsoever in watching this video, but I would definitely recommend either way to go back and also watch the first installment, because it's upon all of that theory that Nick talks about in a lot of detail that we're now going to expand upon that and go straight into the sharpening side of things. So in this particular video, Nick is going to be showing his process for sharpening hook knives, be it spoon knives or ticker cams. Now, if you're not familiar with what a ticker cam is, don't worry, we'll be looking at an example in a moment. Now, just a couple of quick things to get out of the way before we begin with the meat and bones of this video. As you can see, this is a bit of a lengthy video because we're covering a lot of things. Now, to help facilitate that, we've broken this video down into chapters. So if you scroll along on the timeline of this video, you can see all the different chapters marked out. We've also got the chapters written below in the description. Now, to the left of that, we've got the corresponding times in the video in which they appear. Now YouTube has a very cool feature. If you click on those times, it will jump straight to that section. So as you move forward, you can use this video as a reference material, and rather than having to manually scroll through to find the part that you want, you can just refer to the chapters broken down below in the description, click the time, and it will jump straight to that section. The other thing, there are going to be some tools and materials referenced in this video that should you wish to source them from Nick directly, then I'm going to put links to all of those down below in the description. Also, needless to say, I'm going to put a link below, also pinned to the top of the comments, to the previous video in this 2-part series, as well as all the other videos that I have filmed with Nick on the previous visit I went to see him, and also this visit around. So, without further ado, I hope you enjoy the rest of this video. So Nick, before we begin with the meat and bones of this particular video, as I mentioned a moment ago in the previous episode of this 2-part series, you went into a lot of detail about the theory when it comes to spoon knife edge geometry. So what I wanted to ask is, in a very, very basic way, if you could just briefly recap on it now, just to bring everyone up to scratch. Obviously, we highly recommend people go and watch the previous video, but just as a bit of a basic overview and a reminder, could you just talk a little bit about it before we get on with the actual sharpening?
Yes, of course, yes. Well, I'll use all of the blades, spoon knives that I make have a similar sort of edge geometry, but I'll use this bigger one, the Twca cam, as an example, because it's easier to see. So one of the first thing to look at with a spoon knife is that it's going to be used for, I've got dirty hands, but anyway, for hollowing out a bowl of a spoon, say. So the bevel wants to match the cut. So the bevel is slightly convex in this direction. So you need to be aware of that. You don't want a really long flat bevel, and you certainly don't want a hollow bevel, which you're not going to find. But you want slight convex. Sharpening on the inside, the bevel form doesn't actually matter, but as you'll see, we're going to do most of the sharpening on the inside because it's easier. And I have all of mine forged so they're hollow, so you sharpen between these two. So this shiny tram line here isn't sharp, it's just a guide for this tram line, which is the edge tram line, so it's just acting as a guide. So when you put something over it, you can feel it locks in, and even if you then wobble it, it moves the whole blade because it will just sit naturally between the two. So this is just a guide for that one, and that's so much easier to sharpen with. So the basic idea is that you could sharpen from the outside of the spoon blade, but as we said, you've got a bevel which curves this way, so I'd have to tip it up to hit the bevel there. and then I'd have to work round. So trying to sharpen basically in two planes is really difficult. So as much as possible, I recommend leaving that alone, although I am going to touch on sharpening the outside bevel because occasionally you need to, but generally you'll leave that alone because I've put a lot of work into getting this as accurate as I can. So in theory it's going to be right and doesn't need work. So you can pretty much sharpen from one side and just strop the burr off the other, and that's largely what we're going to do. So we'll be sharpening across the inside. So all of my blades are supplied unhandled. So what I'm going to do is just put this into a temporary handle, which, I mean, I'd recommend gluing in, but obviously for this you don't want to watch.
And this is, you created for yourself to be able to switch blades, is that correct?
Yes, yeah. It's just really handy if I'm at a show and people want to buy a blade, they can try out the actual blade they're going to buy without having to have a handle on it, so they can still make a handle to fit, but it's just a couple of grub screws put into wood and just tap straight into wood, and with care you can actually get a good enough thread into wood, and that will certainly hold well enough for sharpening anyway.
Just before you get into that, just in case people are not aware of what a Twca cam is.
Yes, I'm glad you asked me that because I've forgotten. Yes, well, it is an interesting thing because if you ask my neighbour Aled, who's a Welsh speaker, what's a Twca cam, he would say that all of these are Twca cams, because Twca cam is just Welsh for, it's actually Welsh for knife bent rather than bent knife, but because of the way Welsh construct their sentences. So all of these are Twca cams to a Welsh speaker, so it depends who you speak to as to, you know, what a Twca cam is. However, if you talk to a spoon carver or a keen spoon carver, they would suggest that this is a Twca cam and all the others are normal spoon knives. So it's been taken to mean a large spoon knife. I would suggest that it's also one with maybe not necessarily a constant curve, but at least a symmetrical curve. So a bigger version of this, I'd say, isn't a large Twca cam. In, you know, as long as the Welsh speakers aren't listening, it isn't a Twca cam. So it's not just down to size. I think for me, there's a nuance of it being at least symmetrical, if not a continuous curve. So you could have a flatter midsection. Jeremy Atkinson, who does the who makes clogs, he uses a Twca cam for hollowing out the for cleaning up the inside of the sole of a clog. Yes, it's the sole or the inside of a clog. And the traditional pattern which they used for that actually was called a Twca cam, and it was symmetrical, but it had a flatter midsection, was tighter at either edge. So it's not. Yeah, but as I said, but that was because it was from Wales, and any bent knife is a Twca cam. So there's different meanings now. So there we go. I've muddied the waters even further.
So when it comes to the sharpening, where would you like to begin?
The easiest side, which is the inside. So a lot of work's gone into forming this blade, so it's easy to sharpen. So they are more expensive, but they are also much easier to sharpen. So I'm going to put this on a piece of leather just to stop me scratching, because this steel may damage it. So what I'm going to do is, this is actually a new blade, so it is sharp, but it doesn't need sharpening, but I'm going to go through the process. If you were just touching up, I would suggest starting at a lower grit, but you won't necessarily feel a burr. So I'm going to sharpen this as if it needed a lot of sharpening. So this is a 600 grit diamond film on a PTFE rod, although this film is, the adhesive is pretty good and it would stick to, you can stick it to a wooden dowel and it'll peel cleanly, but I tend to use these PTFE ones. So what I'm going to do, although with diamond you can sharpen into an edge, if you've got the option I'd sharpen away. So I'm just going to put this across here and see it'll naturally locate between the two surfaces, and using a fair amount of downwards pressure, run away from the edge, come back. I'm going to work up towards the top. I know some people do a sort of, they keep the blade at the same height and keep the rod at the same height and move the blade, but I'm not used to doing that, so I'll stick with what I know, but there's no right or wrong way to do this. The only way it's the wrong way to do it is if you don't use the back rail as a guide for the front. So that's the idea, is that we're keeping the edge geometry exactly as it was supplied. And with 600 grit, particularly on a new film, I should cut through pretty quickly. And I don't know if we'll see a burr. Oh yeah, you can in places. Can you see there's a little bit of a white? Not sure if that's coming up, but yeah, I can feel a burr there. Yeah. Yeah, you should, 600 grit, you should just start to feel a burr. So like if you're sharp, yeah, definitely you can see a burr in certain places there. So if you can feel a burr, you know you've hit the edge really. So then all you really need to do is work down to the next grit. So I'm going to take big jumps. I'm quite a fan of taking big jumps, particularly with an edge geometry like this, because the actual bevel you're sharpening is a couple of millimetres thick. So you can get through scratch patterns quite quickly. If this was a flat blade, you'd have a huge amount of steel to sharpen off to work down through the grits. You'd probably want to work down with lesser, with lesser jumps, but I'm going to go straight from 600 to 3000. So this is a 3000 grit. You can see the quality of the scratch pattern change almost instantly with the first stroke, so it really won't take long to get through this scratch. If you've got a blade which is properly, properly down, because this doesn't actually need sharpening really, I'm just going through the showing you the process. But if you had a blade which was damaged, and because quite often you'll see a track mark appear on the blade, so what I would recommend doing is carving, because when you get to a 600 grit you don't know if you've actually sharpened it out or not, and it'll still cut at 600 grit. So I would cut a spoon bowl, and you might say this is the spoon bowl, and you're getting like a couple of tracks like that running through it, and it's always in the same place, so you know. So what I would do is then put the spoon knife back in there and put a little mark here, and then you know that that's the area you've got to concentrate on, because it becomes quite difficult trying to work out where you've got to do the sharpening. There's no point doing lots of sharpening here when it just needs to be there. Although you could argue that if you want to keep the edge dead straight, you've got to work the whole length of it, but the reality is you're just going to work on the bit which needs it, you concentrate on the bit which needs it. So if you are finding track marks, or you're sharpening because you've got track marks, I wouldn't go all the way down to the finest grit and give it a go, and then find you've got to go back through the grit. So I'd start quite early on to see where you are, but as I'm not actually expecting any edge damage, I won't bother with that. But that's what I definitely recommend if you're sharpening a blade which has been blunted or damaged in some way. So, same sort of thing, work away from the edge. .3000 grit. And at 3000 grit you wouldn't really feel a burr, except there's still going to be the burr left from the 600 grit to some extent. At this stage you've got options of what to do with removing the burr. I wouldn't go all the way down to the finest grit and then remove the burr. I'd take it off before you get to the finest grit. Generally, with a blade which you're not seeing any particular damage in, I would just be stropping the burr off, and I'll show you that. But there is an argument for, if you've got a blade, because I say a lot of work's gone into this, and when it comes to you, if it's new, then you'd expect the edge geometry to be optimised for cutting. If, however, you've sharpened a lot and you've done a lot of stropping like this, and you've got a micro bevel on there, that's going to make the blade not cut as well. It won't be as aggressive, and you'll have to tip up more to get it to engage. Which is quite nice for some really deep cuts, but if you're trying to, when you get a change in grain direction, you're going backwards and forwards, the micro bevel actually makes it quite difficult to join up in between. So if you do get to a stage where you've got a micro bevel and you can see it, then you can try and remove that. And it is quite difficult. You've got to, I tend to hold it up to the light, and then I can tip until I'm just getting towards an edge. I don't want to tip up so I'm onto the edge like that, but I just need to get it so it's sort of on the, there's a bit of a flat section before, there's a few millimetres of flattish section. You aim for that, and then you'd run gently away from the edge and keep checking as you go around. It's not easy to do this, and I wouldn't do it generally because it's not worth the effort, but if you get to a point where you think you've got a micro bevel and you can see it on the blade, then I'd do this, but I'd do it infrequently because it's a pain. And the whole point of this edge geometry is that it's easy to do and you haven't got to do that, but it is an option if you've got a bevel which needs, micro bevel which needs fixing. But generally, you should be able to just remove the burr by stropping. Again, it's the same sort of thing. I'm going to go up to the edge, just to the edge, and strop. You obviously got to strop away from the edge. This is it's not a very soft leather, but it's a softer leather which has got white compound on it, so it's got a little bit of cut, and it will remove the burr quite easily. And I'm just going to run away. All we're trying to do is remove the burr. I certainly don't want to do more than remove the burr and put a micro bevel on, because then you'd want to remove that. So you're not trying to change the edge geometry. You're not really sharpening from the outside. You're just removing the burr which has been put on by sharpening on the inside. So now I'll go down to, again, a big jump. We're at 3,000. I'm going to go straight to 14,000, which is basically a strop. You don't really need to go. I do sell a 50,000 grit, which if you want to use, I'm sure it'll be a bit sharper. You can see another level of shine coming up on this from the 14,000. And again, same sort of thing, work away from the edge. I mean, you can, because it's diamond, you can go backwards and forwards into the edge, but if you've got the option to go away from the edge, you can use more pressure with impunity because you know you're not going to cut into it. So that's 14,000. Tiny strop to remove. And you're not going to see or feel any burr from 14,000, but with that. And then what I tend to do, keep that clean whilst I work, this is like leather which has got no compound on, which just gives it a little bit extra level of cut, which what we're aiming for. Well, not cut, polish. It's got very little cut. And that should be all you need to do to sharpen. So it is very easy. I mean, in essence, you can, I don't even have to look at it. I can look at you, I can feel that it's located on the, between the bevels, and I can work backwards and forwards. And I don't even have to look at it because the whole thing's guided. So it's a very simple way to sharpen, which is where the work's gone in and why it costs more to do it. But it does make these blades easier to sharpen. You could use this process with a blade which has got a dead flat bevel on the inside, but if you've got, like we're talking about the Mora, a blade which has got an inside bevel which starts off flat and gets progressively more convex, you're going to find it quite difficult to sharpen at the point, well, say the Mora's more like that, isn't it? Doesn't quite fit in, so it'd be sort of flat here, so it'd be all right, but it's going to be difficult to find the edge on the blade, which is actually, we have a Mora here. This won't fit in, but I'll use a pen to so if you were going to do the same thing, it's basically flat here, so you could work there, but when you get to this section, you don't know where the edge is because there's quite a lot of tip and it's very hard and indistinct to see where the edge is. So at that point, if you're sharpening a blade like this, I'm sort of going off on a tangent a bit here, you're probably better off doing some of your sharpening from the outside, because that's probably easier than trying to follow a wavy inside bevel, which is why I go for the hollowed bevel on the inside of my blades. So that's the easier option to sharpen.
And obviously in the previous video, you explained why you get that effect.
Yes, we've got a whole
with the bent
video.
steel. Yeah, we've got a whole video talking about it in a lot of
We're
detail.
not particularly trying to be mean about them, but it's the example we have to hand.
So just a couple of final questions, Nick. So obviously you've demonstrated on the Twca. It's obviously just a larger knife, so it's easier to kind of demonstrate. So kind of just playing devil's advocate here. So you would essentially just repeat the exact same process, but just for the gradually smaller spoon knives, is that correct?
Absolutely, yes. Yeah, I mean, you have to use, as I say, this won't quite fit in. I know it doesn't quite fit, so I couldn't use this diameter down for this spoon knife. But you always want to use the largest diameter, which will fit, because you've got the best chance of keeping everything smooth. If you use, if you used a really small diameter, so I use something this diameter on here, I'm more likely, it's easy. The closer the two diameters line up, the better your chance to keep everything smooth. If you used a really small diameter, you could end up getting little notches ground into it. So, but generally, as long as you keep it moving away and rotating, you should be able to keep this inside edge smooth in this plane.
And the final question I have for you, so the papers that you've used here, and the Strop, etc. So out of the equipment that you've used, obviously you sell these on Hewn and Hewn.
Yes.
You make them available for people to purchase. And so a couple of questions with that is, what out of that you have shown here is available on Hewn and Hewn?
All of it should be. At time of filming, I don't have these in stock because I've had difficulty with my electricity supplier, which makes it prohibitively expensive to be making these. But that should be resolved by the time we are filming, so I should have these in stock. I've got all the equipment in, all the materials in, so these two strops will be in stock. I always have the diamond films and the honing blocks and the PTFE rods in stock. There's never an issue with those. And
so the second part to that question that I wanted to ask in terms of Hewn and Hewn. So obviously you sell all of these on there. So would I be right in assuming people, when they go to Hewn and Hewn, they can essentially put together their own sharpening kit depending on the kind of tools that they have?
Yes, I do have some. I do have one simple sharpening kit which you can buy, which sort of mimics this, but it's a simpler version. It's not self-adhesive papers. But yes, generally I'm selling these individually, so you can put hopefully with accurate descriptions, so you can decide what you need to build the kit you want. But you could always email me if you had difficulty not knowing what you need.
And you ship all over the world, is that correct?
Yes, we'll ship, yeah.
There is one question that actually just came to mind as we're kind of talking, and that is, this is a question I've heard many times from other people, and that is typically from people that are maybe newer to carving or kind of very early on in their journey in spoon carving, and that is, how often should you be sharpening your spoon knives? I know that's a very open-ended question, but it is a question I hear a lot.
And some sort of twee answers needed, isn't it? I don't know. Yes. Oh, that's put me on the spot. Probably more than you think. It's probably, you can't really sharpen too much. Well, you can spend too much time sharpening, but I don't really think you can answer it. It depends so much on the wood. Like sometimes you can have a soft wood which will absolutely wreck a tool edge, and then it will need sharpening a lot. I suppose as soon as you see blemishes or track marks, if you ever see track marks in your work, then you should have sharpened a while back, because that doesn't happen instant. Well, occasionally it happens instant if you drop it, but like if you're getting to a point where you're getting torn grain, you should have sharpened earlier. That's a very bad answer. I don't know.
I know it's a bit of a tricky question in the first place, but it is something I hear a lot from people.
I don't think it depends. It also depends on your technique. I was saying that I tend to, despite trying to be hard on my tools, because I spent so much effort making them, I tend to treat them very well, and I find it hard to replicate edge damage that other people seem to do with impunity. Yeah, as soon as you notice that it's not cutting as well, if you're having difficulty making a cut and you're getting some feathery grain, rather than assume that it's a difficult piece of wood, it's difficult grain, you should also like at least explore the possibility that the tool just needs sharpening. So like even if you're experiencing difficulty cutting, then maybe it's time to sharpen. And then if you're having difficulty with a freshly sharpened tool, you know it's the grain and you can try something else. Yeah.
A bonus question, this is not a trick question.
Not like the last one, yeah.
We feel like a game show now. Yeah. And this once again just quickly sprang to mind, is once you've kind of finished sharpening, you're going to sheathe your tools and put them away. I'm curious also, do you apply any coating to your tools?
Well, yeah, that's where I'll probably be contradicting myself a bit. I've always said, and like, so to sharpen, particularly if you've been using very green sappy wood, it's always good to sharpen, to strop the outside, or strop generally, with one of these wax compounds which I sell, because it removes the scale. I'm not forging now. It removes the any sap or and removes any water, so they're not going to rust. And so there is a good argument for stropping on the inside with compound. And then if you strop with leather afterwards, I think you're still leaving a bit of compound on, so that still works. I have been moving away to stropping with 14,000 grit. I always like stropping 14,000 grit diamonds, but I'm aware that that's not leaving any protective coating on the surface. So if I was leaving them for a long time, then I think there's something to be said for just using a bit of leather wrapped around a dowel with some compound on, because I think that's a really good way to protect against corrosion. So, but I have been moving slightly away from that, and I've not had any issues yet of finding that I've got blades rusting when I've done that. But but certainly the outside, I'd recommend using using compound and then leather as well.
Excellent, thank you, Nick.
Yeah.
So there you have it, my friends, and that is a wrap for this video. Nick, thank you so much.
Thank you, that was good.
No, it was really good. It was really insightful for me to see everything that you outlined and what you've shown. As I mentioned at the very beginning of this video, a couple of very important things. Number one, this is part 2 of a 2-part series I filmed with Nick. In the previous video, as we've alluded to throughout also this video, is Nick talked a lot about the geometry, the kind of deep theory behind that. Highly recommend, if you haven't watched that video, to check that out. Link will be below in the description and pinned to the top of the comments. Also, as you can see, Nick used a kind of array of materials that he supplies himself, and should you so wish to source this from Nick, then what I will do, I'll put links to all the different materials listed below in the description, and you can go check that out, read out more about that on the Hewn and Home website. And lastly, like I mentioned at the very beginning of this video, I have filmed other videos with Nick, both on a previous visit to see him as well as on this occasion. All of those videos that I filmed with Nick in general will be down below in the description. I have one final ask, and that is, if you gain any value from this video whatsoever, to give Hewn and Hone a follow on Instagram. I don't even ask people to follow me on my YouTube channel, right? It would be amazing if you did subscribe. I don't even ask you to do that. All I ask is to kind of, as our way of saying thank you to Nick for taking the time out to show this on video and allowing me to document it so that it may help you. What I'm going to do is put a link below to the Hewn and Hone Instagram as well as website. And like I said, it means the world to me if you get any value from this video whatsoever to give Hewn and Hone a follow on Instagram. So Nick, a sincere thank you once again for allowing me to document this process.
No, it's been a good day.
Yeah, no, it has been. No, it's been very insightful for me as well to kind of learn all the nuances. I don't know if we mentioned this throughout the video, but Nick also teaches this, you know, in live sessions at festivals and whatnot. So it's a real treat, you know, for you guys to be able to watch this on video. And like I said, you know, this is designed as a reference material. So the one final thing, tying all that together, I do need to stress, and that is, this is Nick's personal process. He's not saying it's the only process or it's the best process, but this is Nick's process that he's taken many years and literally having produced and continue to produce like thousands of tools, right? So Nick has a lot of experience to back up his methodology for everything he's outlined in this video. So it's very important to stress that, and by no way is Nick stressing that this is the only way that you sharpen, kind of like spoon knives, hook knives, but this is Nick's methodology that he's kind of evolved over many years through practical experience. Would that be kind of, would I be right in?
Yes, yeah. Yeah, it will vary. Different spoon knives. There, obviously, these method I showed won't work with all spoon knives, but they work with the ones which I make. So yes, it's an absolute.
Yeah, because the sharpening is a bit of a slippery slope. It can get quite argumentative online. So we do need to stress that this is just Nick's methodology, but he's someone who's talking from incredibly vast experience. So, so kind of take that as you may. So to wrap up, like I said, we really do appreciate you watching all the way up until the end if you have done so already. And we really hope you found this video useful. And sincere thank you once again, Nick, for allowing me to document your process. And guys, that is a wrap for this video. As I mentioned, all the links to all the other things that I've mentioned in the other videos, and as well as the materials used in this video, all of those will be linked below in the description, as well as the Hewn and Hung Instagram. So there you have it, my friends. I shall see you in the next installment of the Z Outdoors video. Until then, I hope whatever you're doing, you have a blessed day, a blessed week ahead. From Nick Westermann of Hewn and Hung and myself, Z Outdoors. Peace out.